release of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, we now have 13 mainline Spider-Man cinematic films to rank in the entire Sony SpiderVerse that they've created. This includes the Tom Holland films, the Andrew Garfield movies, the Tobey Maguire ones, the Miles Morales, but as well as Venom and Morbius, because they technically all connect through the SpiderVerse. So with that said, we're going to rank all 13 films today. Make sure to leave your thoughts down below. What is your ranking? I can't wait to see it, because film is subjective and we're all going to be different. And again, if you don't like my ranking, that's okay. I can't wait to see yours. And of course, guys, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for more content like this on a daily basis. So without further ado, let's get into this ranking. My number 13 is Morbius. Now, this is just a pile of trash. Every time, I've seen this movie twice, and I did not want to see it a second time. I say that because I went and saw this movie for free at a press screening, walked out, was pretty disappointed, was just pretty frustrated the more and more I thought about the film, and I was like, there was like redeeming things, and it just felt like the film was completely a mess when it came down to the editing of everything and what they decided to do with the character. And then I saw the post-credit scene, which just pissed me off more. Morbius is the bottom of the barrel for the Marvel movies in general, as well as the Sony SpiderVerse, and I honestly think this is just one of those movies that Sony should just completely forget ever happened. And I say that because I think this is actually up there with like the likes of Catwoman and Elektra. That's how bad Morbius is. Now, my number 12 is the very first Venom movie. Now, for me, I actually do kind of like this one for what it is and what they're trying to do with it. Is it one that I like to go back and rewatch all too often? Not really. Is it pretty deep with its storytelling? Not really. Is it kind of just a fun throwback to 2000s, early 2000s comic book movies? Absolutely. And Tom Hardy absolutely gives such a bonkers role, performance, whatever you want to call it, in this. And the only reason that this film is actually under the brand new Venom 2 Let There Be Carnage is because I actually think it takes way too long to get to the concept of everything that's going on. And every time I watch it, it really just drags in that first 45 minutes. It's so generic, but then the second Venom comes into play and him and Eddie are working off one another, that's where the charm works. On my number 11, though, we have Venom Let There Be Carnage, and for me, I like this one a lot more than the first one. Now, is it better in its storytelling? No, this one actually feels very much like a Saturday morning cartoon of Venom versus Carnage, and that's pretty much what it is. It's very short. There is no filler. There is no time to move. It is absolutely just go, 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 which can be a little bit of an issue in my eyes. I actually think a little bit more story was needed for this. Again, they're still going through the same tone and style of what the first Venom was, but in this movie, you have Carnage. And it's cool to see Woody Harrelson in the role. I think he absolutely did a great job as Cletus. I think Carnage looks really cool. I like the fighting between Carnage and Venom. My only downside to this is when Venom and Eddie split again. Again, slows the film down a little bit. And I do wish the film got a little bit deeper and they actually took, maybe not their time, but there's so much more to the character of Venom, and it just really frustrates me that this is what Sony is trying to do with their Spider-Verse films, when I really think that there's a lot more capabilities that they could see. And for me, they haven't really done a lot with these Venom films. It just feels like what Sony's trying to do with this world is very messy, and I think as a world-building concept now, it's kind of just frustrated me a bit, but Venom Let There Be Carnage is fun. That's about it. Now we get to the meat and potatoes of everything, the actual Spider-Man movies, and at my number 10, we're talking the Amazing Spider-Man. Now, flat out, I will always say this, you're going to hear me say this again when I get to the second film, but I find that these have the best web slinging out of any of the Spider-Man live action movies, hands down. Now, for me, a big benefit of this film is this movie on up, I actually really do love all the Spider-Man movies, even if they do have a lot of issues in them. And for me, I think what Garfield was able to do in this film was actually quite emotional. For me, the best aspect of this film still comes down to the web slinging, some of the action scenes, how Spider-Man is interpreted within, of course, the visual style of what Mark Webb wanted, but it also comes down to his relationship with Gwen Stacy. There's no doubt about it. Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone save this movie, and specifically that is the best aspect of it. There's a couple iterations of how he moves around as Peter Parker that I think don't really fulfill today's light. I think it is very much that blockbuster style, but I can't deny how much I enjoy this movie, and for me, when they rebooted this and I went and saw it, I was actually taken back by pretty much magic, and I was like, this is a really cool Spider-Man that I think is going to go down as a very underrated one. Now, at my number 9, though, we have SpiderMan III, Tobey Maguire's end trilogy, and for me, I like 3. It's not great, but there is a lot of good moments to it, and it is completely overstuffed. Take out the whole Harry Osborn stuff, and just really much leave it between Spider-Man and Sandman. I actually found that to be one of the best aspects of this entire movie, and I think Thomas Hayden Church does an amazing job as the character of Sandman. As well, I do really love what Tobey Maguire is dealing with in here. Now, if we do want to talk about the symbiote side and how that suit is affecting him, some of it is absolutely cheesy, it just does not work. Seems like Sam Raimi was just giving a big middle finger to the studios. But in other terms, I do kind of like the style of what Spider-Man 3 is going for. Again, I don't think this movie is perfect. I think there are a lot of issues with it, but I really do enjoy it, and I think it's one of the most fun films that they've put into this universe. Number 8 is Spider-Man Homecoming. This is literally if John Hughes wanted to make a Spider-Man movie. And in all sorts of ways, it's delightful. Now, the reason it's a little bit lower on this list is just because I do love everything else and kind of the stakes that they build up on this. This is kind of just one of those Spider-Man movies that is low to the ground, fun, has a great twist with the Vulture, specifically Michael Keaton absolutely killed that role. I was so surprised in that moment. And I really love what, again, Tom Holland brings to this role. I think as a first outing of this, and specifically this trilogy, this first off trilogy that we have with Tom Holland, it is very important. And I like all the things that they develop. I like that we have Ned, and that's what he kind of looks at. And of course, the stakes of, Tom Holland having to learn, if I want to be a hero, I am going to have to give up on a lot of these things that make me a kid. Like missing my own homecoming, or missing a date, and, making one of these girls that I have a crush on disappointed in me, but I can't tell them why. It's all those reasons that really click back together, and again, the big thing that clicks it together is Michael Keaton as the Vulture. I have never been a big fan of the Vulture. I've always found that Adrian Toomes is one of the most annoying characters in the comics, and even in games and movies and TV. I've just never liked this character. Homecoming changed my mind on the Vulture. This is how you do it. I also wish this movie wasn't as interconnected into the MCU personally. I understand that's the whole vibe of it. It is an MCU film. But while I do like Tom Holland and Tony's relationship in here, there's just not much more to that, and I do think that those moments are kind of the moments that drag this film just a bit in its pacing. Now, my number 7 is the Amazing SpiderMan II. Now, I know so many people that absolutely hate this movie, that think this is the worst Spider-Man movie out of them all, and you are not wrong. There is a lot of issues. Like all the films I just talked about, this film arguably has more issues than all of those combined. But guess what? This film, for me, is kind of just one of those guilty pleasures. And I honestly don't even think it's a guilty pleasure. I think what Mark Webb is doing here does really fit for the style of the Amazing Spider-Man universe. And this film has only continued to grow on me. Now, again, talking about the core thing that does really work in here, it's Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. Their relationship works. When Gwen Stacy dies in this movie, it is very emotional, and you absolutely feel that heart-wrenched emotion. And no matter who you are, whether you hate this movie or not, I think we can all agree that is one of the best moments in this film. Alongside of that, this swinging. It's like, besides SpiderVerse, because that's just animation, you can do a lot of creative things with that. It frustrates me that Tom Holland does not get this awesome swinging time, whereas Andrew Garfield gets all of it. And then plus, I just really like how the action is actually filmed in here. But going to why this film is only in the middle of the road on this list is because it is a mess. Too many villains again, trying to set up too much stuff, kind of overly cheesy. Harry Osborn is not good in this movie, sadly. And I love Dane DeHaan, but he was not good casting in there. And the list goes on and on from there. But on the other contrary, I do think that the pros outweigh the cons on this. I think the pros of what they did with the character of Spider-Man outweigh all those cons. What the pros they do with the relationship of Spider-Man and, of course, Gwen Stacy outweighs those cons. The visual style, the emotion, the swinging, the action, and in general, Andrew Garfield's performance all outweighs the cons. And for me, the score for this is probably one of the best Spider-Man scores, right up there with Spider-Man II and Across the Spider-Verse. I really do enjoy this movie. I know people hate it. I also know people who think this is one of the best ones. So that is just my thoughts. My number 6 is Spider-Man Far From Home. So when I originally saw this movie, this was actually one of my favorite Spider-Man movies, if not my favorite one at the time, as well as my favorite MCU film. Upon rewatches, some things don't really click together as greatly, and some of that can just be with how the MCU continuity has handled things thus far going forward. Far From Home, for me, what I will say definitively is that this does have, in live action, still the coolest action set piece I've ever seen, and that's everything with Mysterio. Mysterio's illusions and what they are able to do is one of the most unique things, and Mysterio, for me, if you can't see behind me, is my favorite Spider-Man villain of all time. I know he's cheesy, I know he's kooky, and that's kind of why I dig the character so much, but it's specifically his illusions, and not knowing how they were going to do it in live action, they pulled it off in such a stellar way. And I think that's a big reason why I'm so biased towards this film, but I still think live action wise, they have the best action sequences out of all the Spider-Man films. Bar none. Even No Way Home. If you're going from the other side of that, Jake Gyllenhaal is absolutely fantastic as Mysterio. I really love the character and what he's able to bring about and give into that performance, and also giving into it Tom Holland and what he does now that he does not have Tony Stark and he's off on his own for the most part. He really is trying to figure out who he is, and it really just works. But the reason that this movie does kind of irk me is certain choices that they made that, again, the MCU, it's just MCU continuity type of stuff. Why would Tony give Peter glasses? That could destroy a lot of stuff. Why would he do this? Why there's all these why questions that now are filled into my head with specifically when you keep rewatching this movie. Now, again, I love this movie for what it is. There's so many amazing moments to it. It's just some of those like general ideas that you think about. You're like, yeah, that doesn't really work out. But may I say, I do love the beginning of MJ and of course Peter in here, and I think Zendaya and Tom have phenomenal chemistry. At my number 5, though, we have the original Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire absolutely kills it in here. Sam Raimi directed the hell out of this movie, and this is one of the best origin stories when it comes down to comic book movies in general. And I still remember seeing this movie at a drive-in theater the weekend of release, and it was seriously one of the most special moments of my life because I was seeing my favorite comic book character, my favorite cartoon character at that time at such a young age, come to life onto the big screen. I think what this film does, while even aging at towards bad moments, just specifically because of how old the film is, I can't deny how much I do love this movie still, specifically for its charm and wonder. And as well for how damn scary it was. Willem Dafoe is absolutely terrifying in this movie. Along the likes, Tobey Maguire is also really good in here as well. I enjoy this one for what it is. It is what it is now, but it's an iconic movie at that. Now my number 4 is Spider-Man No Way Home. Now this for me is like one of the best MCU films thus far. When you look at this movie, it very much is a celebration of all things live action Spider-Man. And when you look at that, and the way that they combine it with Peter's origin story, it's phenomenal. Like, if you ask me, this movie and Up are all 5 out of 5s, 10 out of 10s. I love almost every aspect of all these movies I'm about to talk about. And first off, Tom Holland gives the best performance as Spider-Man thus far. What he has to sacrifice at the very end of this movie to have everyone forget him is absolutely deeply emotional and is something Spider-Man would do. His final suit swing is amazing. I really hope they don't get rid of that suit in the next film. I also really hope they don't backtrack on those ideas of what they did, and that they keep everything that same way that he is on his own. I don't mind if he has to work his relationship again with MJ and with Ned and whoever, but never backtrack that idea. Most of all, what I love is that when you watch this movie, it makes you like the previous Tom Holland Spider-Man movie appearances even more because it all ties into that origin story. This is his with great power comes great responsibility trilogy, and I say that because he's trying to figure out himself throughout each film, and by No Way Home, once Aunt May perishes, she gives that iconic line, and it really makes sense for him. He's desperate, he's by himself, and then, of course, the other spider people come into this world, and that's where this film truly kicks off. The chemistry between all three of them, Toby, Andrew, Tom, are phenomenal. It's great seeing Toby and Andrew. I feel like we really much got a resolution to both of their characters that I never really thought they gave. But at the same time, very open-ended to the point where we could continue to see those characters maybe in the future, and whether another live-action Spider-Man film like this or just another maybe animated film towards the future. There's so many ideas that you can now do with that, and I just found for me this was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. We all knew it was coming. We all knew it was happening. It was one of the worst-kept secrets in Hollywood, but it was absolutely one of the most gratifying and awesome experiences that I've ever seen, and I will never forget the day where my audience flipped out when Andrew Garfield jumped through that portal, or when Tobey Maguire stepped through. It was, again, one of the most pleasing experiences, and this was just a total celebration of Spider-Man.
It's okay, I'm nice guy.
Now, my number 3 is Spider-Man II, and for me, I'm really liking these films that aren't connected into an entire world, which is kind of one of the reasons I kind of have Spider-Man II kind of just a little bit higher than No Way Home now. Now, Spider-Man II, for me, is the quintessential sequel. When you look at a movie back in this era and you ask about what movies like had the best sequels of all time, this is one of those movies that you really much highlight, because Sam Raimi doubles down on everything from the previous film, doubling down on Peter's story and specifically what it means to be Spider-Man, and also having to really much sacrifice certain choices, the girl that you love, the time that you get with her, or in general having an actual personal life. And I love that Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker has to go through this, and you do see like, okay, well, what happens when he isn't Spider-Man? But the world is full with crime, and they need Spider-Man in this world. And it's beautifully touching. Danny Elfman's score is absolutely stellar, and the suit is iconic. The train fight sequence with Doc Ock is my second favorite live-action fight scene of all time. It really just comes down to the emotion and everything that this Spider-Man film builds up. It is a perfect movie, top to bottom. Now, my number 2 now is Spider-Man Into the SpiderVerse. I never thought in a million years when this film was announced that it would be great. I never thought it. I love animation. I love everything. I love Miles Morales. I just kind of rolled my eyes. I'm like, why don't you just make Miles live action? Like, why does he have to be animated? Damn, did I eat my words when I saw this film. This film blew me away from top to bottom in every sort of department, and the way that I watched this movie, I was just sitting there in total awe of not just the animation, but in the characters, in the score, in the themes, in the soundtrack. This is a movie that has all of that. And at the time of watching this movie, it took me about a year to really appreciate what they did with this. And it instantly became one of my favorite films of all time, alongside one of the most rewatchable movies. When that movie came out on Blu-ray, I rewatched it almost every week. When I had to go on an airplane to Florida on a trip in 2019, I rewatched that film probably 6 times on that flight. Not on the flight, but in general, the whole entire trip. And it is, again, a completely rewatchable movie that has heart to it, that has charisma, that has love put into it, and again is a celebration of Spider-Man itself. But I love the twists and turns they take with the characters, and specifically what they do with the animation. This film is just perfect. It's absolutely great. But until we got to my number 1, which is the brand new Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which you can call recency bias, you can call whatever it is, but for me, I imagine this is like, this is a lot of things for me. And if you've seen my review, you've seen the title. This is one of the best movies ever made. Ever made. And it's also one of the greatest films I've ever seen. It's the best Spider-Man movie. It's my new favorite comic book film. It's everything to me. Like, instantly, I watched this movie and I said, this is one of my favorite films of all time. Because if the first film was so great, and it was already one of my favorites, and it was my favorite comic book film, and then you see the sequel, and I was so nervous going into this because I was like, how do you perfect better? How do you perfect perfection? And they found a way to do it. They found a way to go up above and beyond the animation. They found a way to dive deeper into Miles Morales as a character and to show that self-conscious aspect of what Peter Parker's and Miles Morales or Miguel O'Hara's or any version of Spider-Man feels. But you also get to see where Miles deep down is feeling in this film. That he feels like a mistake, and that people make him feel like that mistake. And if you've ever felt like a mistake in your life, you are going to feel that 10 times in this film. You're going to understand and feel for Miles. And then going alongside that, if you just want to look at the animation and what they accomplished there, my jaw was on the floor. I'm getting teary-eyed right now thinking about this movie, because this movie is like, again, I imagine like the core memory this movie brings me is the first time that I ever saw Toy Story, which, if you don't know, if you can't see from behind me, Toy Story is my favorite movie of all time. So that is saying so much, that a film like this built all of that and gave me back a core memory that I thought was lost forever and reminded me why I love movies so much. Reminded me my first experience watching a movie, and I could not imagine, if this movie was around when I was a kid, this would be my favorite film of all time. And this would be the film that I'm growing up with. And if Beyond the Spider-Verse is even as good or better, this is the best movie trilogy of all time. So, with that said, Across the Spider-Verse is absolutely incredible. I absolutely love this movie. I have a full review on my channel right now. You can go check it out. For me, it is the best Spider-Man movie across the board. It's the best comic book film ever made. As well, it's of course one of the greatest comic book films ever made as well. That's my Spider-Man ranking for this entire cinematic universe. Make sure to leave your thoughts down below. Hit that like and subscribe for more content like this on a daily basis. Next week, I get to see The Flash, so we'll have an early Flash review. I also get to see Elemental and the new Transformers, so look out for all of that. And of course, until next time, stay classy.